Hello, my name is Perpetual. I work at the Learning Agency, and I have the honor of speaking with John Gabrielli from MIT today. I'll be speaking with him on the project that he and his fellow colleagues, Yaakov Petcher and Hugh Katz, have worked on in speech recognition for scalable dyslexia screening to promote reading and equity. So John, I'm so excited to chat with you today. I hope you're doing well.
Doing well. I know a lot of people aren't these days, but I'm doing okay. Thank you.
Good to hear. Yeah, hanging in there, taking it one day at a time. I'm really glad that you are generous enough to share your time to talk about this project proposal. So I guess to start off, could you talk a little bit more about this idea of the screener and what you feel the world could learn if it were created?
Thank you. So we're very interested in helping more children to learn to succeed at reading, because reading is so fundamental for all of education, occupational opportunities in the future, and learning for children. And we know that many children struggle to read. The two biggest reasons are learning differences, dyslexia, ADHD, autism, and poverty, children who grow up in environments that are under-supported for their language development. And the beginnings of reading, the key thing is language. Really, reading is language made visible. And so children that spontaneously learn language at home with their caretakers, and then build on that knowledge to figure out what those mysterious black and white strokes on the printed page are. And so in many ways, the children who struggle to learn how to read, who fall behind in reading, are kids who often have a difference or a limitation in their language experience. So we're able, with increasing precision, to give children screeners a brief assessment as they arrive into kindergarten and discover what language differences are present that can identify a child as being at risk for reading difficulty. And why this is important is that the interventions or educational supports that are most effective to help children make progress in reading are those that are given in kindergarten and first grade. By the time we get into higher grades, it's less clear how to help children. So we want to help children quickly, not only because it's the best help they can get, but also we want to save them any sense of failure. When you're at the little shoulders of that kindergarten or first grader, when they're falling behind their classmates in reading, which is very evident to them, what do they think of themselves as learners, as people who can do things and succeed at things in learning in school? So we're very interested in that. And in fact, so many schools and parents are that 45 states have enacted legislation or are in the process of that, requiring screening for every single child who arrives at kindergarten. So this is widely recognized, but what should that screener be? Well, we want it to be something that's child-friendly, teacher-friendly, school-friendly. And what is mostly in that screener? It's children talking, trying to achieve certain targets. So they might be asked to repeat a nonsense word, or they might be answered to say, repeat the word block, and the child says block. And you say, what would that word be without the b sound? And the child who can say lock is on a good path towards reading on average. The child for whom that's a mystery really needs some help to get on track for their future reading. Or we might say to the child, what happens if I say these two sounds, t and oi? What does that come up to? And they should say toy. And these sound easy for adults, but for little kids, these are non-trivial. But again, the child who can do that is on a path towards successful reading. The child for whom that's a struggle is not. So to have these quick screeners that could be employed widely in schools, speech recognition is incredibly important. Because what we'd love to do is have an online device, right, that scores whether a child has said it correctly or not. And the more accurate the scoring, the more deployable it is, and maybe every child can be assessed quickly, cheaply, efficiently. Teachers given information about which child needs which kinds of. So that's our big goal, is to push up reading in children who are at risk for reading difficulty. And the way we identified it is through speech production. And if we could have a speech recognition software that would accurately recognize speech in this way, that would make the technology much more powerful on behalf of many children. Speech recognition is often tough. My kids have hilarious times tricking Alexa and Siri into hilarious errors. But actually, relatively speaking, we have an easy target because we always know the correct answer. If that child is supposed to say toy, they said it or they didn't. And so that's a relatively easy thing as compared to any kind of sentence anybody can produce, which is the mystery, mystery for Alexas and Siris of the world. So, we're not speech recognition specialists ourselves. We work with others, but we think this is a tractable, practical, valuable direction to go.
Thank you, thank you. And it definitely sounds like a really important and interesting problem you are tackling and trying to solve. I think you may have alluded to this already, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about why do you think now is the right time for this and what makes it such a timely issue to address at this current time?
Thank you for that good question. Yeah, so we think it's because the states are passing this legislation requiring every school to do this. And so, we want to give this schools, the teachers, the parents, the kids, a really high quality opportunity to do this. It's possible, of course, to use screeners that are not so good, but through our research efforts, we're trying to have ones that are highly validated. My colleagues at Florida State University are giving these assessments to hundreds of children, following them through kindergarten, through first grade, through second grade, to figure out what predicts reading success or reading failure, and then improving that screening. And adding the speech recognition would just make it so much more powerful. And the other thing that's really cool is we constantly record children in research studies for this purpose. So in our own laboratories at Florida State University and MIT and in colleagues at other universities across the country, we have thousands of speech samples already recorded. And we know a lot about those children. We know about the environments they grow up. We know about how they progress in terms of reading. So we have a ground truth, both about the rest of the child's situation at the moment they're assessed and about how they developed as readers. And so those samples are there already. And in many ways, they've been scored by hand. When we score them now, it's really a laborious process. There's a skilled researcher who listens to it, a second one who listens to it, they compare notes and they agree with what the answer was. So that, we can't do that in every school with every child, with every item. That would be impossible. Beyond research settings, but a speech recognition thing could allow this to happen in every school automatically and give feedback rapidly to teachers who would know which child needs which kinds of help. So I think the combination of the legislation on the one hand that's going to require this kind of screening and the technology of speech recognition that could play a tremendous role in making this really widespread. And not only in schools, but perhaps in pediatrician offices. They could, you get all kinds of hearing tests now and eyesight tests. What if you got a language test that told you if the child's ready at risk? And what about parents? Maybe we could make this available to parents because right now, for example, to get these kinds of evaluations is pretty expensive. And for families who can't afford it, they have long waiting lists. So we think this could be really exciting. One of the examples where technology can really be democratizing in terms of the opportunity for all families to know if their child is on track, and if not, to get them help right away.
Thank you. No, it totally makes sense as to why it is the right time given the new policy focus and it being mandated. So having quality screening processes definitely seems like an important priority. But has similar work been attempted before, or how could you describe improvements that would be made upon in this project using the speech recognition technology that would advance this work much farther than before?
Yeah, so the speech recognition for children, I'm not an expert in this, but I've been told by experts, is a very underdeveloped field because children articulate differently than adults. And most of the commercial progress is with devices for adults. There's not many 5-year-olds ordering on their own Alexas into their home, right? So, a lot of this is just there hasn't been as much push on the child front. Now we identify a clear need for it, not only in a commercial sense, but because we're not pursuing that, but in a sense of pure education and educational opportunity for children. So yeah, I think that it's an area that's been under researched, so to speak, and because it's what the practical application has not been very clear to people. And we think that out of educationally inspired research on behalf of children at risk for falling behind in school, this opportunity becomes very crystal clear as something that's at hand and again, tractable. We don't have to figure out everything a child says in a complex sentence. We know what they're supposed to say. And so we think it's a very good practical problem.
Yes, no, that definitely makes sense. And it's clear that this is something that could notably improve performance for children, their reading ability. And I think you've mentioned this throughout our conversation, talking about how children could, be benefited through the early screenings and early interventions. But I was wondering if you could expound a little bit more on that, on how children of different backgrounds, you focused on specifically children with dyslexia, or maybe children of color, children who may be behind already in their reading ability, how they would be impacted by this work.
Yeah, well, we hope that identifying the children in need of support, will drive educational practices and policies to get them that support. There's a economic and political aspect of this that follows, but the first thing, and what we also know from research, that there are interventions that are highly effective for children. But the screener also needs to be sensitive to cultural and racial variations in community communication. There's been recent studies at several places, for example, that some African-American dialects are misunderstood by speech recognition system. That, it's the same thing we've had in facial recognition. In speech recognition, that has not been sensitive to variation in experience and cultures. And we think that's a very important aspect of this, because if we're going to get the screening correct, it has to be adjusted for the background and experience of every child. So we think that's a very important aspect of this, is to be able to be sensitive to children who grow up in bilingual environments and dialects that are vary from one community to another. And so we're hoping very much that being sensitive to that from step one will make us make it a valid measure for every kind of child.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. I was wondering if there's anything else you'd like to add or note about your project, its intended focus, impact, or just any other tidbits that you think the audience would really value from knowing.
Well, thank you, Perpetual, for the good questions. I appreciate being guided to. I feel like we've touched on this issue, but it's just very exciting to think that a technology like speech recognition, which has advanced so much, could be intertwined with the best of science, the best of school technology, to do something which is, we just don't want kids to be identified by the reading failure, to wait until second, third, fourth grade and be behind their peers. And then late and slowly some help may come to them after years of struggle. We want to have that child walk into kindergarten, every kind of child, through the huge variation of children we have. And if they're at risk, help them beforehand. Don't wait for them to be a year or two behind their colleagues, their peers, their other children in the classroom. Identify the ones at true risk validly, correctly, and then bring help to them, before failure. Don't wait for failure. Catch these children before they fail and let them flourish.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. This was a pleasure for me to learn. I hope for those of you who are also watching and tuning in, you also valued from learning more about this project. Once again, I had the pleasure of speaking with John and Gabrielli from MIT. Their project is called Speech Recognition for Scalable Dyslexia Screening to Promote Reading and Equity. There will be more information on this work that you will be able to find. But overall, it was a pleasure chatting. Thank you to all who were able to watch. I hope you learned as much as I did. And with that being said, take care.